Imagine stepping into a tomb sealed for 4,000 years. Your flashlight slicing through the stale darkness to reveal the shimmering gold of a burial mask, its divine face hiding a secret so grotesque. Even the gods would look away. Beneath the wrappings lies not just a mummified boy king, but the fragile ruin of a bloodline poisoned by centuries of incest. This wasn't a death by accident or plague. This was the slow collapse of a family, so obsessed with purity they doomed their own children. This young pharaoh, a child worshipped as a god, lived a life of hidden agony, a crooked spine, a jaw that never aligned, joints so brittle he walked with a cane by the time most boys were learning to run. Palace servants dared not speak the truth, whispering instead of curses, as if divine wrath, not human choice, warped the royal body. To him, genetics was a concept yet to be born, but deep down he must have sensed it. Something was broken in the blood. His parents were siblings, his grandparents were siblings, his great-grandparents too. Every drop of blood in his veins was a recycled legacy of a family determined to remain divine at any cost. From infancy, he was told his suffering was sacred. When royal babies died in their cribs, priests called it the will of the gods. When a prince was born with deformities, it was said the gods had marked him as special. The kingdom was a gilded prison built on a lie, that holiness came from blood, and blood must never mix with commoners. For 3,000 years, the pharaohs of Egypt clung to the myth of divine bloodlines, intermarrying with sisters, cousins, and nieces, convinced they were preserving celestial perfection. Instead, they created a breeding ground for genetic collapse. It began with one man, one ruler, who believed his sister alone was worthy of sharing his throne and his bed. To marry a mortal would be to dilute the divine, a sin not just against his lineage, but against the gods themselves. The priests agreed. The court approved. No one asked what price the children would pay. And so the tradition hardened into law, then into culture, then into blind faith. Each generation sank deeper into isolation, believing deformities were divine signs, not warning flares. What began as spiritual purity became biological suicide. A slight overbite in one generation became a debilitating jaw in the next. A clubfoot here, a stillbirth there, all brushed off as mysteries of the gods, never traced back to the bedrooms of the royal palace. The Egyptians were not fools. They were master builders, astronomers, medical pioneers. But even the sharpest minds can be blinded by belief. Court doctors chronicled the twisted bodies and early deaths, but never saw the pattern. And when one particular dynasty emerged, in the blinding heat of the 14th century BCE, it would take Egypt's genetic obsession to its horrific climax. That dynasty began with a boy born into splendor and pain. His name was Akhenaten, and long before he became the infamous heretic who abandoned Egypt's gods, he was a child whose body betrayed every lie told about divine blood. His skull elongated unnaturally, his hips flared wide, his chest swelled with feminine curves. Servants looked away, courtiers spoke in riddles, artists lied, but the deformities were too grotesque to mask. When Akhenaten took the throne, he did something unthinkable. He told the truth. He ordered his family portrayed as they truly were, alien, fragile, misshapen. The realism was jarring. Elongated skulls, distended stomachs, children who looked as eerie as their parents. Historians once called it an artistic revolution, but it was something far sadder, an act of honesty from a man too exhausted to pretend. His wife Nefertiti bore 6 daughters, and perhaps several sons, most of whom died. The daughters who lived bore the same signs, divine to the court, but visibly sick to anyone looking closely. And maybe Akhenaten's religious revolution, his worship of a single sun god, his abandonment of ancient temples, was born not from divine vision, but genetic despair. If the old gods cursed his family, perhaps a new one could save them. So he moved the capital to a remote desert, built a new city, and buried his family in golden isolation, cut off from the world, hoping the sickness wouldn't follow. It did. The pharaoh died young, his revolution collapsed, his city crumbled, his name was erased. But his bloodline lived on into the next generation, into a boy already broken at birth. This was Tutankhamun, the child god with clubfoot and a curved spine, the boy king whose body bore the full cost of a dynasty obsessed with its own blood. But before we follow that legacy further into darkness, let me know in the comments. Where in the world are you watching this from? I find it incredible that across oceans and centuries, we can all witness this tragic history together. Now, let's descend deeper into the tombs and into a nightmare centuries in the making. At just 19 years old, Tutankhamun's weakened body gave out, not from war, not from poison, but from a simple case of malaria that a healthy man could have survived. His immune system, ravaged by centuries of inbreeding, was defenseless, and as fever consumed him inside the Golden Palace walls, he may have realized the terrible truth that none of his physicians could name. He was not cursed by the gods, but by his blood. Every painful breath, every collapsed joint, every failed pregnancy in his family, none of it was divine punishment. It was the price of a dynasty that valued purity over survival. His death came quietly, buried under rituals and gold, forgotten by the world until Howard Carter opened his tomb over 3,000 years later. Ironically, the very genetic damage that caused his early death preserved his resting place in perfect condition. And when DNA analysis was performed in 2010, science finally confirmed what the ancient world refused to see. Tutankhamun was the child of brother and sister, a biological victim of a political obsession with bloodline purity. You would think such a devastating end would serve as a lesson, that Egypt, having seen the cost of incest and the collapse it brought to one of its most sacred bloodlines, might have changed course. But history rarely learns the first time. And in Egypt, the myth of divine blood proved more powerful than truth. Over 1,000 years after Tutankhamun's tragic death, the mistake would be repeated on an even more catastrophic scale. When Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 32 BCE, his death a decade later triggered a brutal scramble for power. One of his generals, Ptolemy, claimed Egypt as his own and declared himself pharaoh. But Ptolemy didn't just adopt Egyptian titles, he adopted their darkest tradition. Surrounded by temple carvings of pharaohs marrying their sisters, the new Macedonian rulers mistook inbreeding for divine mandate. They weren't even Egyptian, but the symbolism of purity was politically irresistible. And so, the Ptolemaic dynasty was born, a Greek family ruling Egyptian lands while recreating the genetic nightmare that had doomed the dynasties before them. Brother married sister, their children married each other, over and over, for 300 years. Imagine the palace conversations, young siblings raised side by side, told from childhood that they were destined not just to rule together, but to lie together, to breed together, to continue the line. What should have been the safety of family became a prison of obligation. Cousins, siblings, uncles, they all became entangled in a royal bloodline so incestuous it defied logic. The family tree became a tangled loop of names repeating endlessly, each generation more genetically damaged than the last. And at the end of this spiraling lineage, a single woman would be born whose name would echo through history. Cleopatra VII. Born in 69 BCE, she was the final result of 2.5 centuries of genetic isolation. Her myth endures as one of beauty and seduction, but reality paints a grimmer picture. The Ptolemaic family had been marrying within itself for so long that the damage was unavoidable. Historians suspect Cleopatra bore the same signs of inbreeding as her ancestors. Sharp, exaggerated facial features, possible jaw deformities, and the invisible burdens of inherited weakness. Her fabled beauty may have been less about appearance and more about projection, a political necessity crafted by Roman poets and Egyptian priests alike. What truly set Cleopatra apart wasn't her face, but her mind. Unlike her fragile ancestors, she inherited intelligence that seemed untouched by her lineage's decay. She spoke 9 languages, understood philosophy and science, and navigated the vicious politics of Rome with a skill that left even Julius Caesar and Mark Antony enthralled. But her most critical mission wasn't political, it was genetic. Cleopatra needed new blood. Her children with Caesar and Antony represented more than dynastic alliances. They were her desperate attempt to break free from centuries of inbreeding, but the Roman Empire was merciless. After her defeat, Octavian, soon to become Augustus, made sure her children would not survive to challenge his rule. These children, stronger and healthier than any born in generations, were quietly erased, and with them, Egypt's final hope of escaping the genetic spiral died. When Cleopatra took her own life in 30 BCE, whether by snakebite or dagger, we will never know. She ended not just her reign, but a 300-year biological experiment in royal destruction. The Ptolemies had conquered Egypt militarily, but Egypt had conquered them genetically. They came as foreigners, but by adopting Egypt's sacred obsession with blood purity, they fell into the same trap that had consumed the pharaohs before them. This wasn't just a pattern of individual families. Egypt's history reveals a terrifying cycle. During powerful dynasties, the desire to preserve divine blood always returned. In periods of strength, rulers refused to mix with outsiders, and in doing so, planted the seeds of their own collapse. The Old Kingdom practiced occasional inbreeding. The Amarna period took it to an extreme. When those dynasties crumbled, new rulers would marry foreigners, bringing diversity and stability. For a while, then the cycle would restart. Isolation, damage, collapse. It happened again and again. Power bred arrogance. Arrogance demanded purity. Purity led to pain. The archaeological record bears witness to this. Mummies showing distorted bones, skulls reshaped by genetics, records of short lifespans, and royal infants who died before their names could be carved into tomb walls. Each time a royal family gained strength, it seemed compelled to retreat inward, believing that mixing blood with outsiders would taint their legacy. And each time, it paid for that belief in the most human way possible, through the suffering of children. The deeper you look into Egypt's royal past, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't just political ambition gone wrong. It was a recurring biological tragedy disguised as divine tradition. Each time Egypt's royal bloodlines closed tighter around themselves. The lesson was the same. Diversity brought life. Isolation brought decay, but the powerful refused to listen. Dynasty after dynasty repeated the same fatal mistake, as if ruling Egypt came with a built-in instinct for self-destruction, and the cost was never abstract. It wasn't measured in policies or wars, but in human lives, in the slow, visible erosion of flesh and bone, in the private suffering behind palace walls. To truly grasp what inbreeding did to these so-called gods, we have to imagine not just what science now tells us, but what it felt like to be them. Picture waking in a chamber of marble and gold, with servants kneeling at your bedside, and before you even move, your body screams in pain, your spine aching, your jaw misaligned, your breathing shallow and strained. You are worshipped as a god, but every part of your body reminds you you're anything but. You cannot run, you cannot laugh freely, you cannot play with other children. You grow up surrounded not by friends, but by other fragile relatives, other half-broken mirrors of yourself, cousins and siblings who reflect your deformities back at you. Your destiny is already written, to marry one of them and produce another generation of sacred suffering. In this golden prison, love is a lie. Marriage is politics fused with biology, and no one escapes it. Royal girls, in particular, faced a terrifying existence. Every pregnancy was a gamble between deformity and death. Would the child be born alive? Would it survive infancy? Would it resemble the gods? Or would it reveal the truth behind the illusion? Some queens retreated into silence after too many miscarriages. Others disappeared from public life entirely. The lucky ones found comfort in wine or opium. Most endured their grief in private, while court ceremonies praised the divine will that was killing their children. Modern genetics explains what they couldn't. When close relatives reproduce, each child has a dangerously high chance of inheriting 2 copies of any recessive gene, the blueprint for disaster. In a healthy population, these genes are masked. But in royal Egypt, they compounded like a curse passed from one generation to the next. You can see it in the mummies. The sunken skulls, the malformed jaws, the club feet, the compressed spines. Art historians once believed these were stylistic flourishes, exaggerations of divine beauty, but they weren't. They were realism forced into sacred imagery, deformity passed off as holiness. The royal portraits with their stretched heads, feminine male bodies, and distorted proportions weren't fantasies. They were silent cries for help dressed as art, but the damage didn't stop at the surface. What ancient artists couldn't paint were the internal horrors. Immune systems so fragile, a cold could be fatal. Lungs that struggled to breathe the desert air. Brains affected by hormonal chaos. Nervous systems wired for pain. These weren't minor issues. This was cellular devastation, a body collapsing from the inside out. What began with a few awkward traits in one generation escalated into full systemic failure by the next. And yet, no one stopped. No one asked why. Every dying infant was seen as part of a divine mystery. Every malformed heir was reinterpreted as a god's unique creation. The priests found ways to bless the suffering. The courtiers kept the secrets hidden, and the cycle ground forward. Each generation was weaker than the last, but still, the throne demanded more. After all, this wasn't just politics, it was theology, it was national identity. The pharaohs believed their power came from their blood, and so they clung to it, even as it betrayed them. The tragedy is that this wasn't a single, long disaster, but a repeating one. Egypt's history shows moments of recovery when foreign queens married into the royal line, bringing strength and diversity. The Middle Kingdom thrived because it allowed political alliances to outweigh genetic paranoia. Royal children were healthier, mummies more intact, dynasties lasted longer. But the peace never lasted. With each return to power, the obsession with purity returned too. The New Kingdom and Amarna periods saw genetic extremism reach new heights, with Akhenaten's family openly displaying their deformities even as they declared themselves divine. The artistic records from this time are almost grotesque in their honesty, showing children and rulers alike with alien-like features, elongated skulls, swollen bellies, and impossible limbs. These weren't artistic revolutions. They were genetic documentation, evidence of collapse hiding in plain sight. After Amarna's fall, Egypt turned outward again, marrying into Nubian and Near Eastern royalty. And again, things improved. Stronger bones, longer lives, fewer deformities. But then came the Greeks. The Ptolemies, seduced by Egypt's ancient myths, reintroduced the very thing that had almost destroyed it. Their reign marked the most extreme chapter in Egypt's genetic collapse. A closed system so isolated that family trees became genetic cages. And through it all, the cycle repeated. Diversity brought strength, purity brought pain. But every dynasty learned too late, if they learned at all. The evidence lies everywhere, in bones, in tombs, in art, in death masks that try to hide suffering behind gold. The pharaohs believed they were preserving divine power. But in truth, they were conducting one of the longest and cruelest experiments in human genetics the world has ever seen. And his subjects weren't rats or peasants. They were kings, queens, princes, and princesses. They ruled the world, but couldn't escape the prison built by their own lineage. The end of Egypt's royal inbreeding tragedy didn't come through wisdom or reflection. It came only when science forced humanity to confront the undeniable cost of genetic isolation. For thousands of years, divine blood had been seen as a blessing. But when genetics emerged as a field of knowledge, it exposed the ancient curse hiding beneath crowns and gold. Inbreeding wasn't preserving sacred lineage, it was destroying it, cell by cell, generation by generation. The pharaohs couldn't know this. They saw genetic diversity as contamination, a threat to their God-given power. But modern biology teaches us the opposite. Variation is protection, evolution's way of guarding against the silent damage hiding in our DNA. Harmful genes exist in all of us, but they are kept at bay through diversity. In the royal tombs of Egypt, that diversity was deliberately stripped away in the name of political purity, and the results became catastrophically visible. These rulers weren't just victims of bad luck, they were casualties of ideology, and though their intentions may have been spiritual, the consequences were biological and devastating. Their collapse, though tragic, gave rise to modern knowledge. Every mummy unwrapped, every bone scanned, every DNA strand tested brought us closer to understanding the human genome. The very suffering these rulers endured became a gift to the future, teaching modern science what unchecked genetic isolation can do to the human body. So now, as we return one last time to the tomb where this story began, where Tutankhamun lies beneath his death mask of gold and reverence, we must look beyond the art. That shimmering mask wasn't just a tribute to divine power. It was a shield, a desperate attempt to hide the truth of a broken boy sacrificed to ancestral pride. When we look at that mask now, we don't just see a king, we see a child whose life was shaped by decisions made centuries before he was born. We see a victim of misguided belief, of traditions that valued bloodlines over health, symbolism over science. And if these ancient rulers could speak across time, what would they say? Perhaps Akhenaten, the heretic king whose body defied beauty, would warn us against clinging to religious dogma that distorts reality. Perhaps Tutankhamun, the crippled boy god, would beg us to prioritize compassion and understanding over purity and pride. Perhaps Cleopatra, the last pharaoh, would urge us to abandon dynastic pride in favor of love, humanity, and survival. These were not just kings and queens, they were living case studies in the consequences of marrying power to ignorance. Their voices are silent, their temples mostly ruined, their names carved into stone and dust. But the message remains, not written in hieroglyphs but in bone, blood, and DNA. Mixing bloodlines is not weakness, it's survival. The tragedy of the pharaohs teaches us a timeless lesson that no culture, no religion, no dynasty is above the basic laws of biology. They thought they were protecting something holy, but they were in fact engineering their own destruction. Their golden tombs became monuments, not to eternal life, but to generational suffering. Their crowns, once symbols of divine right, now represent the weight of decisions made in ignorance. Yet their suffering was not in vain. The knowledge they unknowingly gave us is priceless. Every geneticist who studies their remains, every archaeologist who documents their deformities, every historian who pieces together the puzzle of their decline is continuing the work they never understood they were part of. They became the unwilling founders of a science that would outlive their empires. As we leave their world behind, stepping out of the shadows of their tombs and back into our modern lives, we carry more than curiosity. We carry responsibility. We remember them not as gods, but as humans who paid an unbearable price for the illusion of purity. And from their silence, we hear a final plea: do not repeat our mistake. Choose science over myth. Choose health over ideology. Choose life over bloodline. Let no throne, no tradition, no ambition ever again demand what Egypt's royal children were forced to endure. Remember us, they whisper from behind the gold. Remember what we suffered. Remember and learn. Tell us what you felt in the comments. Like, if you believe history still has lessons to teach. Subscribe, because some truths are too important to stay buried.